Hi guys, thank you so much for joining. I'm Flora Johnston, Junior Fashion Editor at the Financial Times, and I'm here to speak today to Ross Bailey, founder and CEO of Appear Here, and Henry Holland, who is now a creative consultant and had his own fabulous label, House of Holland. So thank you guys so much for joining. We're going to kick off with Ross because you have launched this fabulous campaign called Save the Street. Do you want to kind of just tell us a little bit about it and why it is great and meaningful?
I think, Flora, that, from our side, Appear Here, we set up the business to help empower people to be entrepreneurs, to empower people to have that sort of economic empowerment and to go out and be able to bring their ideas to life on our streets. And in many ways, like COVID has completely paused and completely been against everything we stand for. And, as the year's gone on and there's been multiple lockdowns, lots of restrictions, I think that, the retail industry has just been massively and considerably affected to such an extent against other industries. And we just want to make sure that there's the right support, the right things in place, that our streets and retail survives. And, our community, more than many communities, has been massively affected from a point of that sort of economic empowerment. It's been affected, and we want to make sure that we change that and we see amazing entrepreneurs and livelihoods survive this pandemic, and more importantly, our streets survive it.
So what are the main goals of this campaign?
I think as well as that economic empowerment that Ross was talking about, there's a huge amount of creativity on the streets, and it isn't just kind of the nuts and bolts of running a store. The magic that's created from in-person retail, for myself as a creative, and I'm such a visual person, going just to wander around the stores, especially at this time of year, and just seeing, the decorations or, the visual merchandising that is going on around our streets, from the big guys through to, the small independents, just the level of creativity and the way that can inspire and, just really create a real atmosphere that you're just not going to get from a really generic website, which, I like shopping online like the rest of us, but every store looks exactly the same. There's so much there's only so much you can get from 2D imagery of product. And I think, that touch and feel and that atmosphere and that magic is just so, so important. And it's something that I feel really passionate about helping to support and save.
And I think also during this whole pandemic, when we started off, I feel like we sort of thought everyone's in it together. We've all got the exact same, support. There was furlough that treated everyone equally. And I think as the pandemic's gone on, you've realised that, it hasn't been equal. And actually, whether it's the technology sector that's massively thrived during this period, some people COVID's been a benefit for. And in the retail sector, they've actually had to completely close their stores. And to Henry's point, that's a massive issue because it's people's livelihoods and there's all of that side to it. But from a cultural point of view as well, I think we felt it was really important because, whereas the technology industry, which we're a part of at Appear Here, and it's been amazing to get government support there, but fundamentally a lot of these other industries don't have the same diversity, don't have the same ability of having so many people have the opportunity to participate that retail has. You go down any street and it's often the place where an immigrant starts their first business. It's a place where from all kinds of backgrounds you have people who are merchants. And that idea of Britain being sort of a nation of shopkeepers, you realise that it's that cultural sort of clusterfuck that makes our cities incredible and our towns incredible. And I think it's really important during this time that we don't see more power go to very few individuals and a few big technology companies, but we keep it that many people can access, many people can participate, many people can make their dreams happen. And I believe that the arena in which that happens is our streets.
And do you think they're going to be facing more difficulties? Lots of people are talking about another lockdown happening in January. What are going to kind of be the big struggles for the high street retailers to kind of overcome during this period? Right now, everything's open. I mean, walking around London and urban cities, it seems like people are returning. But what are the challenges in order to keep a business open right now?
Well, I think that's the worrying thing, right? Is post the first lockdown, you actually saw eventually after summer things start to come back. You saw a lot of shops put in the different sort of safety precautions that they had to do, and by October they were starting to get back on their feet again. But shops have had to be closed for between 50 and 80% of this year. It's mental, and their biggest sales period for most, whatever category, most independent stores, it's the lead up to Christmas, and for half of that they've been shut. January is a pretty dire retail month anyway. And on top of the threat of lockdowns and things like that, I think what we're asking for is the ability to have a bit more foresight, a bit more planning so that these shops can survive, and some kind of stimulus so that they can be here in the new year. I mean, there's a risk, we read recently that something like half of the independent stores could be closed by the end of next year, and really terrifying numbers. And I think that it's just important that we don't see those stores disappear.
And to go back to the creativity point, obviously a lot of shops were closed. It was really difficult. Henry, you got involved. What do you think creativity-wise has come out of this pandemic? You yourself have done the logo for this campaign. What it kind of inspired you behind those really bold graphics? What creative aspects do you think has come out of lockdown that you think are quite inspiring?
Yeah, well, I think for a lot of creative industries, through times of hardship and times of kind of turmoil, people really have to engage those creative muscles and work in different ways. And I think from the fashion industry's point of view, it's forced it's forced a change that had been needed for quite a long time. And I think what I personally hope for is that those changes remain once, any restrictions are lifted and the pandemic is over. And that we really take this as a kind of wake-up call in terms of, fixing a system that wasn't necessarily serving itself in the best way, and working in a way that is much more kind of tenable and, achievable for creative people and creative minds without this sort of constant kind of hamster wheel of churning out, more and more product with less and less creativity involved, because there just simply isn't time. And then I think in relation to the campaign, right now I just feel like we're all screaming and shouting. We're literally wake up, somebody look at what's going on, somebody do what you can to fix it. I think every sector and every area of business is feeling, the same way. And as just human nature as being in these enforced lockdowns and kind of, being our sort of idea of civil liberties being removed, what people are talking about, but people just want to just sit there and scream and shout and be look at what's going on. So I think my signature style has always been quite shouty and loud, and it's always been me by nature, I guess. But I think very much so with this campaign, it was really important to kind of get something that was really direct and really forthright and just a really bold statement that says what it needed to say. It's that don't make us obsolete. I think that's how a lot of independent retailers are feeling right now. And I think, after the support that's been given to the food and drink industry with, Eat Out to Help Out, I just feel like there's a huge area of our streets that just haven't been given what feels like, the same level of support. And when you look up and down the country, you look at the high streets now, and more you're losing independent retailers from from the fashion world, or from, what would be considered traditional retail, and they're already migrating into food and drink venues. Like Ross was saying, we're a nation of shopkeepers, and what makes our high streets so unique, and what, we are so unique in the way that we have these streets and these high streets all up and down the country, is the diversity around there. And if it's just these urban centres where you go and have dinner and then you go home and buy a t-shirt on the internet, I just feel like we're losing a huge part of our national culture, which I think is really important.
Ross, you said that there were still a couple of good things to happen in previous conversations. Have there been some really good success stories, even during lockdown, that kind of show that desire to return and kind of congregate is definitely still there?
Oh, 100%. We've seen we've seen fishmongers that have opened up during this time, and butcher shops, and so many little provision stores and delis across the country that are thriving. And I think that's, again, amazing to see that, there's been this sort of understanding where when shops were closed and this sort of respect for the entrepreneur, where people are going, maybe to the supermarket for certain items, but they're actually wanting to go to the butchers and the fishmongers and things, and that return of, people being more aware and conscious of where things are from and wanting good quality and wanting someone that probably knows a bit more than them about that thing to be the person in their local town. And I think what's interesting with retail and why we use the word streets with the campaign with Henry versus high street is because we are actually really optimistic about the future overall. We think that our streets are somewhere incredibly important, and actually the high street that we talk about often in the press that's gone and been disappearing over the last few years is the high street that actually wasn't around for that long. This sort of idea of mass retail where you buy as much product as possible and you have these cookie cutter identikit stores across the country, that's only really existed since the mid-80s till now. And actually the retail which is about great quality, about that neighbour, about the person in your area who knows what's needed, about the places where you go to gather and build community and belonging, and all of those sort of independent stores, that has existed since the beginning, since ancient Greece, right? I mean, it really has always existed.
So
and there's
you
been
think
pandemics.
we're basically having a kind of retail renaissance, even something quite negative, this could turn into something actually really positive going forward?
In my view, we've had wars, we've had pandemics, we've had all sorts of stuff happen in the world, and that's type of retail, which is frankly not about buying, it's about gathering, right? It's about spending time with each other, it's about connecting. That has always existed. So the idea that somehow this pandemic will get rid of that is to me ridiculous. However, the retail that was already, which was a part of innovation in the age of this sort of scaling retail that started to disappear and move more online, that probably will go. But look, rents are going to become cheaper. We're already seeing. And and yes, some stores will disappear, which is super sad. But there's also an opportunity here where for there to be sort of a renaissance of our streets, for there to be incredible injections of creativity and more people than ever to access them. And what we want with this campaign, and the reason we use streets and to sort of add to what Henry's point, is there's been these incredible success stories over the last couple of years that we've seen. Last year we launched more shops than what closed, and these incredible success stories that have done so well, that have been growing during this period, and now in suddenly a moment where they're like, will we survive the next 6 months? And I think that's really unfair, and that's why we want them to have, the right support mechanisms. And, one point just to add with the sort of rates relief that we've asked to be extended is already over the last week, you've seen Tesco's, Sainsbury's, massive big retailers giving back business rates to the government. So the government already gave that subsidy away and they've had that return. And so far they've had 1.8 billion given back. Eat Out to Help Out cost $500 million and it delivered a return of that back to the Treasury. So you're looking at this going, they've already sort of given that money away. It's come back to them. Use a bit of that to help create the right stimulus for our streets, and it's the best of both worlds.
I mean, you're talking about support and collaboration. I mean, who else is involved? You obviously have the fabulous Henry here. Who else is actually behind this and, trying to make a change as well? You've got a couple of good names on the list. Do you want to explain a few?
So ultimately, it's for our community, which is, in the UK, over 100,000 independents, entrepreneurs, creatives, all across different industries. So it's we're doing this on behalf of them. We've listened to them. We've heard what they need in terms of support. And that's what came out with the free asks. And then we've got, amazing retailers, independent retailers from The White Company to Charles Tewett to, different to Goodhood in sort of Shoreditch, to amazing small boutiques, to big chains, but all of them independent, backing this campaign. And there's a list of incredible names that thankfully are supporting this. The British Fashion Council, BERA, the sort of trade body for independent stores, are all behind this and wanting to make change.
And do you think so far there's been enough noise to make it happen? How can people get involved and basically lift this message up? What can the consumer do? What can people who follow Appear Here do in order to make this even bigger?
Well, look, I mean, we only literally, we spoke to Henry a couple of weeks ago. We've moved quite quickly. We're going to the aim is to launch this properly for the end of the week with the open letter that's been signed. We want to get Henry's posters all over the place, and we want to push this message this week. So we're only just starting. So I guess anyone's support that believes in this, it's, between this period, first of all, shop local, pick that right store that you believe in, and remember that every pound spent is ultimately a vote for the way that you want this world to look. And I think also if people can share the message and give us feedback of if there's anything else that they think is important that's been missed, this is all about saving the street and using a word that, this is about the beauty industry, this is about the home, fashion, everything that contributes, cafes, anything that makes our streets the diverse, incredible places that they are. I don't know if Henry's got more to add as well.
Well, yeah, and I think sharing the message, sharing, any of the visuals, but also I think sharing your own experiences. I think as a nation, we all have natural connections to the high street or the street or however you want to phrase it, and that it forms part of our our growing up and our formative years. We've spent so much time in these independent retailers, and I think just thinking about that and acknowledging how important that they have been for all of us, and then in turn going out and voting with your wallet. It's important to make sure that people are not just sitting there and saying that they support something and saying that they want something to continue and then buying everything for Christmas on Amazon. I think it's just that there's a real danger of people doing that because of convenience and all the other things. And I just think, like, if you do have a personal connection to this campaign, share it, tell us what it is. What are your experiences of the streets? What makes the streets special for you? And I think we should really encourage people to talk about how important their local streets have been for them.
Not to kind of play devil's advocate here, but between January and August, there was something insane, like 6 years worth of growth for online sales, especially when it came to retail. It's clear that online is going to increase no matter what. How are we able to kind of balance that physical experience and that online? Henry, I'll start with you first, because you've obviously had your own fashion label anyway, and you've had to deal with that dichotomy. That's clearly going to now last even going forward. Like, how should we be balancing that? Still supporting physical, but clearly the digital is never going anywhere.
Well, I think the role of physical retail is evolving. I think, as digital grows and grows and becomes stronger and stronger and opens you up to a global market, then of course it's going to be an area of focus for any business or any label, because it has the most potential for growth, of course. But I think the role of physical retail is evolving already, and it's becoming this this showcase and this storytelling space where people can go in and physically interact with a brand and learn about the brand. It isn't just about, I want the red t-shirt. It's about why that red t-shirt is part of the collection and, what were the inspirations behind it. And there's a way of curating an environment in a retail space that is akin to how you would at a fashion show, and as a designer, one of the only places where I had, because I never had my own permanent store, one of the only places where I had full creative autonomy on the way in which my collections were presented was in that fashion show environment, which is a closed environment, which was, aimed at, it was B2B. It wasn't necessarily aimed directly at customers apart from through online channels. So I think this retail environment and physical retail just becomes an evolution of that process where you're telling the story to your consumers, you're bringing them in on the journey. And it's very much about explaining all of the creativity behind what it is that they're buying and getting them involved that way. If they come into the retail space and they then choose to make, their final purchase online for convenience, then you've still got them on board as a returning consumer. You've still got them on board, with that journey. But I think so many retailers now, there's not many that don't have the online presence to back up the physical retail. And so I think the physical side of it is all about really, that storytelling showcase that sort of really allows them to exercise that creativity. And then if the functionality of online shopping can continues to be the place that, you know, they make that final purchase, then you still need those two elements. They're still very much, you know, they're still of equal importance to me.
I mean, Ross, what do you think? Like, do you feel that digital is kind of threatened more than ever? Or do you think actually this is kind of like a unique opportunity for people to reappreciate that physical experience?
I think it 100% an opportunity. I think, look, it's not, I think we sort of looked at them like it was binary, like which one's it going to be? And I think if anything this year, more than ever, people realise that it's about, you know, it needs the two. Last year at Appear Here, our biggest customer group was digitally native brands that open up physical stores. That's where they were getting their growth. That's where they were building a connection. And there's always been this thing of like, you know, stores are about experience, they're about all these things, and it's somehow affecting online, but we don't really know why. And I think in many ways, online is a innovation of the checkout. It's where you transact. And guess what? The worst bit for me about going shopping was the queue. And if I can do that online, brilliant. But the other idea is we don't sit at home anymore really on laptops. I mean, I don't think I've got out my laptop for weeks. I do everything on my mobile, and it's when you're out walking about, which is also commerce, right? Commerce is now everywhere. And I think that, you know, what you realise is that physical on our streets is still where we want to be. And I've realised that, you know, more this year than ever before. When we were in total lockdown, you know, the idea of the mass exodus of cities, people being bored, you know, people's mental health being massively affected, and all of these things, you know, the moment that streets started to open again, the moment that there were restaurants and cafes and the little stores were there, you know, for the first time, I think I realised I've always enjoyed stores. I've always enjoyed streets. I wouldn't be doing what I do otherwise. But I realised that actually, this is fundamental to my happiness. And over the last few years, you see that, you know, where there's a great street with a high distribution of independents, house prices sell for 20-30% higher. These are all things that show just how important physical stores are. And one of the things that was really interesting, Flo, during this pandemic is I think a lot of people all felt suddenly this feeling of, you know, it was sort of like January, February, March, was it a week or was it 5 years? And you can't, like, your mind can't really figure out what happened. Like, my memories are literally the week before lockdown and then a bit in August when it all felt normal. And then it's gone again. And there's been a ton of research that's come out from different amazing universities and different sort of thinkers that has shown that it is in our evolution that our memories are created and are placed in our brains based on physicality. So if you talk about a hotel you stayed in 5-6 years ago, you can, you know, and I say, you know, do you remember the hotel you stayed in Vegas? Someone can remember what the room looks like, which side of the bed they slept on, the conversations they had, but you can't remember a Zoom call from a few weeks ago. And that shows you that is where our memories and how they're formed, and probably why, you know, when you go into a shop and you have this amazing experience, you get a feeling, you have some kind of emotion, you remember it, you remember that brand, and then sure, you'll buy online. You only need to have that memory once or twice, but you need to have that memory and it needs to be physical. And I think it's the physicality in which those things are created. And that excites me that there's this research and stuff that shows that this is important. And, you know, we've all had that sense that as humans, we're there to connect. And, you know, office is where we work and home is where we live. And retail and streets and hospitality is where we go for really one thing, which is to connect and to share and to discover.
The Save the Street campaign could really have more longevity then than just kind of asking the government to help out. I mean, where do you see this kind of extending beyond January next year? This isn't just this seems like it's a kind of collective effort in order to create more experiences. It doesn't seem like a kind of short-term thing. Do you have bigger plans for Save the Streets, or right now is it quite focused?
I think right now it's 100% focused on the right things to make sure that our streets get through this period. But I think, you know, to us, over the last however many years, everyone's talking about how do we save the high street and all of this stuff. And our view has always been, it's about giving more people the opportunity to access and participate. And you know, everyone I spoke to and friends I've spoke to have always got that idea in the back of their head that they want to do. But it was just that retail and shops were really expensive and also set up for businesses of a certain scale. And if you can give people flexibility and access, you suddenly bring energy and ideas and pure creativity. And if anything, I hate the word retail because it makes you think of people buying stuff. I mean, we've had people take a store for a month and do completely random stuff. You know, we had a guy a few months before lockdown.
You can't remember lockdown.
But took a shop in New York, right? Took a shop in New York opposite Carnegie Music Hall and put in his piano and played Beethoven for 48 hours with his school rejection letter behind him as like a spite store. Last week we had someone take a massive old department store in the middle of Manhattan and turn it into a tennis place where now that local community has like 20 tennis courts that they can book and go into. So I think that the idea of what retail is needs to completely, the definition of that word needs to completely open up. And to me, what I've realised more than ever, you know, this year is that streets are where we gather, and it's important, and it's why you live in London or New York or whatever town. And when you're walking down the street and you know you're going to all these places we mentioned, I think it has a big thing as well in people's mental health, and it's what makes us human. And I think the final thing is, from my side, is like we also, what this is about is like, what world do we want? And you know, there were moments during this pandemic when I wasn't in the office and I was at home, and you sort of sat on a Zoom call, clicking end meeting, going into the next one, and it was so transactional. And you know, you're having your food delivered, or you're queuing up for the shop, and you're cooking everything at home, and you're literally like, it felt like a weird sci-fi, you know, like one of those terrifying sci-fi movies where everyone's like plugged in and they're like
Black
in
Mirror
this
episode 2020.
Yeah, and it's like a scentless world. I mean, I had COVID, it literally, you know, took away my sense of smell for like months. And it was like we were living in this scentless world, which was like this really efficient place that had zero joy, zero passion, zero energy. And you're sort of like, if this is the way that living's going to be, is it that interesting? Whereas the moment things open up, you go, you know, I want that creativity. I want that more people can participate. I want things to be in the real world. And there's more to life than efficiency. And I don't want to live in a world where everyone's plugged to a screen. I mean, to me, it was like this idea of hell. And I think that's also, frankly, what we're fighting for. You know, entrepreneurship is the most purest form of human self-expression, whether you're an artist or a designer or someone making an object or whatever it is. That idea of putting something out there that connects to people, to me, is self-expression.
It gave everyone as well a real sense of appreciation for things that they just didn't think about, you know, that they just didn't realise were things that made their lives richer and fuller, and that they really did appreciate. And I think, you know, with this campaigns, it's come at a time where people are actually starting to see that some of their kind of most loved and treasured parts of their lives and stores that have been parts of their lives aren't going to survive. And, you know, it really is kind of like this wake-up call for a lot of people, because people just assume that certain businesses are of a certain size, that they're just, that, you know, they are going to survive. But, you know, in the last month, we've seen some massive names, you know, on the British High Street go, or look like they're going to go. And, you know, it's really made people question, oh, wow, you know, if I do want this world that I really like and I really appreciate and I've missed by being taken away from through lockdowns, that I want to get back to, that I'm going to have to invest in that in a certain way.
I think that's the thing, it's experiences missed, isn't it? And the fact that there is, the moment lockdown finished, like people flooded, people wanted to get out, and I think the need for experience isn't going to go. Ross, why don't we finish on with you with what you want to say?
I was just going to say, you know, also from an economic point of view, right? Retail's the biggest employer. It's the biggest employer in the private sector. Independent retail, every sort of nearly 70p you spend out of every pound goes straight back into like that local community. And most of that goes on employment. When you spend the same on a major international internet company, you know, a fraction of that goes back into the country, let alone into that local community. And, you know, I think that we're sort of looking at massive industries that have had funding, massive industries that have had support. And you've got this industry, which is the biggest employer, which is of certain demographics, which has more diversity, which is made up of more small guys than big guys, and yet has had nothing. And I think that that's really important right now, that, you know, if we can extend rates for a year, they're going to have to do that, in my view, anyway. So let retailers know it now, and it can be an opportunity for them to keep more people employed, and to the ones that are doing well to use this moment to open up into new cities and new towns and new areas. And let's have some kind of stimulus package that encourages people to shop local, because that's going to keep more people employed. And it's going to help give a bit of stimulus that helps those retailers survive this period. And, you know, what we saw, which was really exciting, is that coming out of the summer, some of these stores had fantastic months. They did better than ever, which shows that this isn't about saving something that's about to disappear. But, you know, it's about saving something that really does make sense and is working. And it's just about them getting through this period. So I think government's got to do it, and we've got to encourage them to, and we've got to show that it matters.
Perfect. Well, I think we should wrap up there. So thank you very much, team, and, you know, good luck with the campaign, and thanks for chatting.
Thank you. Thanks, Flo. And thanks, Henry, for designing the amazing slogans.
Thank you for having me. Bye, guys.